Hello and welcome to an exciting, what is it called? A joint venture between ShockMarathons podcast. Hi, Charlie.
Hello.
And the Motern Media Infomercial Podcast. We're here to interview the great Justin DECLOUX. Hi, Justin.
Hello. Thanks
Hey,
so much for having me on here.
Yeah, and we specifically want to talk about your life as a movie distribution executive.
Sure.
Is that how you introduce yourself to strangers?
I have never described myself that way. If asked about it, I say I run a boutique Blu-ray label. It's like no one asks after that because it sounds fancy enough to be like, oh, okay, I guess he does Blu-rays out of his apartment, which is 100% true.
Yeah, well, what a great idea. And I'm loving it. Let's Charlie, start us off.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've been with our covering of the VHS era. We're interested in distributors. I think you see a lot of in the '80s boom. There were all these interesting smaller ones that started up, and they kind of went away once the video store. They did go away even before the video store era ended. A lot of those were small, fly by night, but now I think there's a little bit of a renaissance of that kind of thing. People who have knowledge about interesting movies that deserve to be out there. And what was your inspiration? Were you thinking like, hey, I want to get some stuff out there and maybe no one else is specifically doing this? Was it something along those lines?
It was something that I've always wanted to do. Like even when I first moved out and I started working in a video store called Eyesore Video, which is still open in Toronto, Canada, me and my friends would like put together something that we would put on the shelves. And so like only 2 copies existed. And it was like our custom cover and it had a commentary track on it. And it was some like really low budget movie that was shared in public domain. And it's something that I would have always loved to like do professionally or been able to do regularly. But other than doing it there at the video store, it wasn't something that I pursued principally because I knew I wouldn't have that big an audience.
So then, so then flash forward, you get an audience through your podcast. Would you say is that the where you're getting most of them?
Oh yeah, that's 100% where most of the people are that buy the Blu-rays that I put out. So I did this podcast, Important Cinema Club, for a couple of years, and me and Will have always talked about, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had our own Blu-ray distribution label and we put out like all those films that you'd see in the bargain bin that are in the public domain, like Roger Corman stuff or like really obscure martial arts films. And we always like pushed back a little bit because we were like, you know what? No one's going to buy this. Like, who are going to buy it from us? How do we even do this? Yeah. And eventually, I think Will Sloan, my podcast co-host, was showing me like a Blu-ray that he ordered from some guy in Germany. And I was like, okay, I got it. I can do it like this. I'm going to try to use this template. Just make one, see how it goes. And if it goes well, then maybe we'll do more.
And how long ago was that?
Ooh, I don't know if it's been a year. Like my original idea was like, all right, I'll do 3 a year. Like I'm going to have probably tons of them in my home, but it'll be fun and I'll do it. And we released the first one, The Dragon Lives Again, which was like a Taiwanese like Bruce Lee imitation where Bruce Lee dies and goes to hell and teams up with Popeye. And we limited it to 125 copies. We put it online and it sold out in like a week. And I was like, you know what? I guess I'll wait another 4 months to do the next one. And my partner Emily went, why don't you just do it monthly? And I was like, could I? Would enough people be interested in buying it? And yeah, they have been. So I've kept doing it.
So now, have they been stuffed with bonus features from the start, too?
Oh, yeah. So basically, the logic that I have behind this project is we are not giving people a movie that is super rare in the sense that like they could go to YouTube and find it. And we're very clear about that when we talk about it, like in the just description on my website, being like, listen, this is available, and what you're really paying for are all the special features that I'm putting on it. That is like the value to this package.
Yeah. And what's the process for you of like time wise and technology wise and just creative wise of making those special features?
So I've never actually timed myself. If I did, it would probably like, make me a little bit sad at how much time I spend on it. But the trick to making these things is that I just had to find like a formula.
Okay. And so you're producing, I know, like audio commentary, but you're also having sit down, like you're producing video content too that kind of goes with it sometimes.
Yeah, so basically what I've kind of settled on is that each release will have liner notes, so like a little booklet within the disc. 'Cause it's always fun to crack something open and you find some like written content.
Yes.
And it'll also have a commentary track and 2 video featurettes. Now, at this point, there's like 3 variations. There's trailer reels, which is like I cut together like 60 or 90 minutes of trailers related to the topic on the disc. Like it could be a martial artist, it could be a director. It's discussion videos where it's like me and somebody else are just talking about something and I edit it together and like clips show up if we talk about them. And the third one is video essays. So it's like a bunch of clips edited together. They're usually like 6 to 10 minutes and it's me talking over it.
Okay, and now producing the actual thing, you get
like
a bunch
physical discs.
The physical discs. Walk us through that with both the box and the art and the booklet and the disc.
So one of the things that I was the most scared of when I started making these Blu-rays is that like I'm gonna have to do like the graphic design of it in Photoshop, and I was like, oh, very scary. It's not something that I want to do because I'm not good at it. I don't know if you guys, Charlie, you are a visually minded person, so you do all that, Photoshop stuff, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And so I just kind of jumped into it, and I was like, okay. As long as I have a template, I think I kind of like based it off like a Vinegar Syndrome disc. I was like, as long as this is the same thing every time, then it's not too stressful of like things being crooked or things looking wrong. And that's the way I went about it. Originally, my idea was that I would have like the original poster art in the middle of each disc. But I have some friends who are artists. And because I was able to sell some, I was able to pay them to do the art on like original art for each disc, which is also like a value. Like you can't see this anywhere else.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a cool thing to have on the shelf.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I don't want to get like too bogged down in the details because I feel like people listening will be bored.
No, we like the nitty gritty. Get into it.
So I'll start like right from the beginning of like designing the discs. I do it in a program called Adobe Encore, which has been discontinued at this point. But because I had an old copy, I could still do it. So I make like the menus and stuff like that. Super easy. And then I burn them onto verbatim Blu-rays, 25 gig ones. And you can order those off like Amazon. And once I get that disc, I print them on my Epson printer. It's the XP7100. And so I do them like one by one. I just put them in and it prints really nice. It goes all the way to the border. I have hundreds of discs where I was like testing it out and being like, wait, how do I get it so there's no white? Because like there's some like public domain companies like Alpha Video. I don't know if you've ever gotten DVDs from them, but they're really cheap. Like you can see like the white outline in the middle of the ring because they don't bother to like make sure that it's all covered.
Right.
And so after I have the disc complete, I order cases from a website, duplication.ca, and I get Blu-ray cases. So I tried to get the cheapest ones first, and the problem I had was because there's a booklet, it wouldn't stay open. So under my bed right now, I have like 150 Blu-ray cases that, they're the cheapest of the cheap. I never know what I'm going to do with them. Yeah. And so once I get those Blu-ray cases, the cover I design at home, and I get printed at a local printing shop, Staples, on what's called cover cardstock, 80-pound gloss. And then once I get those, I cut them at home and I stuff them into the discs myself. So I basically do everything.
Yeah, and it's one disc at a time that's being burned.
One disc at a time that's being burned.
Yeah, and how much of that is on demand?
It's all... basically, I try to have like 10 on hand at a time when I release them. And like I try not to build them up too much, being like, in 3 months, I'm releasing this. I almost want to catch people like right in the moment. And because they're limited edition, like we've sold out like 4 of our titles at this point. And people still email me being like, when is this going to come back in stock? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I made 200 and that was it. At this point, I actually have 3 burners that can all run at the same time. So I can like get them done really fast. But it is one at a time in the sense that I don't have like a tower or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's something. That's great. I mean, you got your own factory in your apartment. I love it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that is
like,
cool.
The thing about sending them off is that I'm never gonna sell 1,000 of them. I don't think at this point. So like printing 1,000 would just have my too small apartment filled with Blu-rays. So that's why I do it on demand. And if there's ever any issue with the discs, I can like fix it and then reauthor it again. Like for example, if something fell out of sync or I don't know.
Right.
There was this one time I did one and I gave one copy to someone and he messaged me and said, one of the interviews you did has no sound. So I was like, crap, I got to go in. And thankfully no one else had gotten one at that point. So I was able to reauthor them.
Yes, that's a good point. There's no master, like a glass master with thousands pumped out off that one. Oh, that's a whole different level of stress. Yeah, we've done that.
Have you ever had one that had like an error in it and you're like, oh no?
No.
Okay,
but just the process of sending it to disc makers or something and, just praying that I did it right.
I made a disc of Local Legends with just like 300 copies, and the photo on the menu is upside down, I think. But I just went with it.
Because I'm doing it all and like no one is really like checking over it. There are so many variables I feel could go wrong when I sent it to the duplicator. Because like if I sent it to a duplicator, I get the cases as well. Like one of the first ones I got, all the text was garbled. Like it was all like symbols and I had printed like 100 of them and I was like, oh no. And thankfully the guy was like, the people should have checked and called you before they printed it. So, this one's on us. I was like, phew, but nothing like that's happened since then.
And then you get orders and you're mailing them all too, right?
Yep. I mail them all myself. I've been getting bubble wrappers from Uline. So it holds about like 2 to 3 discs, and I have like bigger envelopes that I got off Amazon. They're just bubble wrappers. They're self-sealing ones, so you just peel them open and you stick them closed. And because I use the service Shopify, you can actually just create shipping labels that you just print, you cut, and you can just tape it to the package, and then you just drop it in the mail, and it'll get to the person.
Nice. And how much is in our international concerns for shipping?
Not at all. It is fairly expensive, but it's the same that if I went to the like post office and mailed it off. Like it's not any more expensive than regular. Even though that like if you order one disc, you're like, whoa, shipping is almost the price of the disc. Yeah. And that's something I'm very conscious of, as well, is that I keep it like at a pretty low price point because I know that like this isn't like a big special edition with press discs and stuff like that. So I just want people to be aware of that. Like basically if it's like a public domain gray market movie, it's like $10, and if I work with the filmmakers, it's $15.
Nice.
Yeah, the prices are very outrageously reasonable, I think. Now here's a question: are people starting to like send screeners to you to try to lure you to release their movie?
No, that has not happened yet. Every movie that I've put out has been like someone that I know. And I really hope that doesn't start happening, only because I will have to like send like very polite letters to people being like, hey, I appreciate it, but I'm not taking any submissions at the moment. My pal Peter Kaplowski, who you guys know, like he watches so many movies that like most of them I hear through him being like, oh, I wish I could program this movie, but there's nowhere for me to put it. Like I did Mango Shake, which was the one that I just recently did. And that one I love so much. It really kind of surprised me that they would be willing for me to put it out on Blu-ray, but I tried to do my best that I could and put it out into the world. So
nice. So you don't have any advertising. So far it's just the talking about it on your podcast and with different film people and maybe through the filmmakers themselves if they
100%. I don't do any like Facebook advertising or Twitter advertising or any of that stuff because the audience I think is like so specific to like people who would be interested in this stuff. So if like people saw pop-ups that show up, they'd probably be like, ooh, this is interesting. And I'm scared that someone will get a disc and be like, wait a minute, this doesn't look something that was pressed in a studio. Like I don't actually like shrink wrap stuff either because that's just like an extra step that, would like take hours and hours extra time. And I'm glad that people that are not even that familiar with the podcast that have stumbled upon my releases have been really happy with them. So I hope it's the price point that like eases it as well. There's a lot of love put into it, and that's what I think is the most important.
Now the podcast, how long you been doing the podcast?
Oh man, I don't know. Probably like 4 years, I think, maybe even 5 years. We've been doing it for a while.
And what was there like a moment where you guys like something happened where you like mentioned by certain people and suddenly you got tons of listeners, or has it just been a slow and steady climb?
It has been a slow and steady climb, pretty much. So I think something that really helped is that my podcast co-host, Will Sloan, after he started doing the podcast with me, was like, hey, I want to do my own podcast too. And he did one called Michael and Us with his friend Luke Savage. And his friend Luke Savage has like 40,000 Twitter followers. So they got a bigger audience than us. And I feel like it helped with like a trickle-down effect. Of people are like, ooh, like these people are talking about movies. This is interesting. And that's how the audience has been able to grow over time. And like Matt, I try to be social on Twitter, which is very hard sometimes.
How about
Very cool.
How about Albert Brooks and Will Sloan being best friends, by the way, huh?
Well, did you see the end of that story?
When he said, sorry, I pressed the wrong button?
Yeah, exactly. It's Occam's razor. The second that happened, I was like, oh, Albert Brooks probably like slipped and like clicked follow on Will.
For those of you who don't know the story, on Twitter, Will Sloan tweeted about Albert Brooks's performance in Taxi Driver, I believe, and then shortly after that, Albert Brooks, who had only been following one person on Twitter, was then following two, and Will was the second person. Am I right about that, Justin?
100% right. The other person was his wife. And I think if Will had not said anything, he could have like stayed Albert Brooks's friend for like weeks. But he not only like screen grabbed it, but then he tweeted directly to Albert Brooks, which I think prompted the unfollowing.
Yeah, either way is fun,
Yeah. How about you guys? Have you guys ever considered like doing your own Blu-ray releases or DVDs, or?
A little bit, I guess.
Well, I mean, we've gotten our DVDs, pressed by
Druid movies,
by disc makers and whatnot. We don't have our own factory, not since back then, but I mean, frankly, we don't have as big a following as you guys do for the podcast, like
movies. Yeah.
Now do you go, Charlie?
The Druid movies were the same way Justin did them.
Right.
We just didn't have any customers.
Right.
We just gave them for free. But I printed, I just burned them on a burner at home and printed at the printing shop, and then used their cutter to cut it kind of decently. And then, but I did not have a print on the disc printer. I just wrote in marker. Cuban country, so there were a few of those. I do have a Blu-ray burner now, but when River Beast came out, we sold the rights or whatever, and they didn't want to put out a Blu-ray, so that's why that one doesn't exist on Blu-ray, only on DVD.
Like a lot of people just don't want to put out Blu-rays, and I mean, I'll be honest, like our transfers, unless I work with the filmmakers, are usually standard definition. It's like whatever's available, as long as I don't step on any people's toes. Like we did a Three Stooges one that was the public domain shorts that you always see all the time on VHS and TV and stuff like that, and those were released on Blu-ray. But I'm not going to use those because like those are new, like a company paid for them. We found the best looking public domain copy that we could, and that's what we put out on the disc.
Smart.
Yep, that's smart. That's smart, because there's a certain amount of value that they invested to remaster it, and that becomes a new thing. Just like when they used to colorize movies, and it's like, oh, the colorized version is now a new version because we invested. Yeah.
I don't want to step on anybody's toes when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like, it's when companies like release a title that like, oh, maybe I want to do this, and I look online, I'm like, oh, it was released in Germany and they did a remaster version of it. I can't really touch it in that case. But if it's something like we did Little Shop of Horrors, like I found the best standard quality copy of Little Shop of Horrors that I could. It had terrible sound, so I had to find another standard def copy and put the sound on that one to make like the ultimate version. I also like fix aspect ratios a lot. Like I'll look at a martial arts film and be like, oh, this isn't the wrong aspect ratio on the DVD, so I just bring it into Premiere and I fix it and up-res it for Blu-ray.
Nice.
Okay.
Are you working on anything new for you to make a new movie? One of your own?
All the time, and I usually get about 10%. Unfortunately, I don't have like a Charles Roxburgh or a Matt Farley I can bounce off of, so it's a little tough to like get through those hills. The other two feature films, I always had somebody else that I could like bounce off of, and as you guys know, it's much easier when you have a partner in crime.
Yeah. Would those come out on this label? If you
Yes.
if you make a new movie, you're like it's a just-in release on.
Oh yeah,
Golden-
100%.
Okay.
That when I started to do it, I was like by release 3, I was like, oh, it'd be great if I just made a movie and put it out through this, maybe had one screening, and that would be it. So I wouldn't have to worry about like film festivals, which was so stressful and stuff like that. Just like make it and put it out in the world. And people enjoy it, they enjoy it.
How are your movies competing with the public domain movies in terms of sales?
Oh, not even close.
Public domain is winning or what?
So like the movies that I made, a lot of them are on Amazon Prime. So like someone watches it, and if they love it, they'll buy it. A lot of people buy them when they buy like everything, when they like discover the website and they're like, I need everything this company put out. And then they'll just Teddy Bomb and Impossible Horror will find itself onto that list.
But
So-
that's great. That's brilliant. You build up this catalog and then you slip in your movies in there, and it's a nice little boost for your movies.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like when someone has a record label, and if they like, oh, they like this band and this band, then they must have good taste. So you can kind of trust it. Did you place those on Prime yourself? And do you have any? Is Golden Ninja strictly physical?
It's strictly physical. Yeah. So basically the way like even like other filmmakers, when I work with them, for example, you guys or like Conal Pendergast, I did his movie Flesh Freaks. I say like, listen, this is only physical media. I'm not one of those guys that's like, oh, I need to own the film for life. It's like, I just want to do this. Once I've made my money doing this, you guys can do whatever you want with your movie. Like if you sell your movie while these are still in print, that's fine. You can go do whatever you want with it. But a lot of film distributors just have no interest in physical media at all for new pictures. So like I have a like special niche that I'm filling, this little collector's market, and I don't make that many, and I, put as much as I can into them. So when people buy them, they feel that like it's a fun time.
And it's good that you're coming at it from the point of view of a filmmaker, so you can understand the needs and desires of a filmmaker, and you don't want to rip a filmmaker off, which is a nice.
No.
Unlike most distributors, it seems.
I mean, because the price point is so low on these discs, I can't pay a lot of money to the filmmakers, but I can pay a little bit to the filmmakers.
Well,
so.
I can attest. I got my Local Legends pay, and it was more than we got from River Beast in 7 years, right, Charlie?
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Because we got nothing from River Beast in 7. We got sales sheets that claimed we were in the red every 6 months, right, Charlie?
Yep.
I don't understand how film like distributors can do that. Like you hear these stories all the time that they pay nothing to the people who give them their films. Like,
yeah.
What the heck?
We told you. Well, I think it was through mainly inventing fees, and some of them were even rounded up. They weren't even cents. It would just be $1,500 miscellaneous. And that's actually a line item on the sheet. So we're never going to come out of that, out of that hole. And but I mean, is it worth $1,500 for us to hire someone to audit and then all the paperwork? It's just like there's no way we can't afford it, and we'd rather just make another movie.
What if you learn that they made like $1 million off like River Beast through all
wouldn't
of
that be
their sales?
crazy? I mean, the most insulting thing or most crazy thing was that we lost $200 licensing it to YouTube. That showed up as a charge against us on our distribution sheet.
That's wild.
For those hundreds of thousands of people watching River Beast.
I mean, you know what? It happened to me too with Teddy Bomb. I had a company that said like, we're gonna make you this much money, and it just ended up on YouTube before I could put it on Blu-ray. And I was like, what the heck? All right, if you put it on YouTube, I get some money from this, right? They're like, oh yeah, it's on its way. Never came.
Yeah, I gotta talk about fun now though. I'm gonna cut you off, Riley.
Okay.
Sorry. I wanted to ask Justin, how did he get so much knowledge about kung fu and martial arts? I guess genre in general, but specifically martial arts. Like, did someone give you copies of movies when you were little, or was there a great section in the video store? Well, what's up?
No. So when I was little, I lived in a really small town that had like 1.5 video stores probably. I think they rented movies out of the Radio Shack. but there was nothing, and no one ever talked about movies. Nobody wanted, to go see movies with me because there was no movie theater in town. You had to go to Ottawa, and you're a teenager. You can't drive. Your parents have to drive you. So I think it was just like the early forums that I kind of stumbled onto them. And I have a very distinct memory of watching Dawn of the Dead, the George Romero one, for the first time, and just venturing into the world of online forums and just like discovering movies that way. And I was a lurker. I never really like wrote very much on the forums, but just like, absorbing all the stuff people recommended and talked about. And that's how it led me to like my love of movies and all the stuff, and just watching so many movies from that point on, thanks to the magic of the internet. Especially now, you can just watch anything that you want anytime. Most of it's on YouTube.
Okay, so it was through like forums and stuff.
Yeah.
And you gravitated to genre specifically, it seems, right? So you're a horror fan, you're an action fan, and you're a martial arts fan.
Yeah, I think that it's because those things, like, you could take a moment from them and it's really like, impressive to someone that sees it. So like, I remember my friends would come pick me up in the morning. We walked to school together. And if I saw some like crazy Japanese horror film that had like a great gore gag in it, I'd be like, oh man, just come and see this one thing. And they'd be like, whoa, that's cool, man. But I'm like, yeah, they enjoyed it because, there wasn't always the time that we could hang out and watch entire movies. So like, because those films were so on the surface, like exciting, that's why I probably went to them just, by instinct. Like you guys, I know you love like regional horror films, but that's something you really need to sit with like a bunch of pals and you just kind of like enjoy the whole experience. It's tough like watching 1 5-minute clip and getting it all. It needs to be like something that builds up. And because my friends didn't really have any of that interest in movies, it was the way that I could share it with them when I was a teenager was through like those moments.
I get that for sure.
And then did you see, since you've grown up, you've made 2 feature films, right?
Yeah.
And you've also built a podcasting empire and a boutique distribution empire. Were all of those on your radar, say, when you were 20 years old? Were you thinking you wanted to do all that stuff, or did you just kind of fall into some of it?
Oh, I definitely wanted to do all that stuff. It's just like an extension of wanting to share stuff with people. Like even as a movie maker, it's like the love of like someone watching something that's fun, whether I made it or not, and being like, I had a fun time with that. I think that even when I was a kid, like that's what I've always searching for. So like I started a film society when I was in college. After that, I started the Laser Blast Film Society, which was like in someone's house, and I bought a projector and I just showed movies there, and then it moved to a cinema. And those are all extensions. It's the same thing with like Blu-rays or like my podcast. It's just like sharing movies with people that I enjoy. Like I do a bad movie podcast because I know that like people love to listen to that kind of stuff, but my angle on it was like, okay, how about we watch these movies and we each pick one thing that we like about it. Like, so it's called No Such Thing as a Bad Movie. And like, that's the gimmick of the show, is that we can like riff on stuff and be like, oh, isn't this ridiculous? But you also have to pick something that you like and talk about why you like it. Because, it's about sharing and having fun experiences, not just always like, ha, this is bad and lame. I'm better than it.
Yeah. Listeners, the show is called No Such Thing as a Bad Movie. That's right, Justin? Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
It's great. The episode, you did the 2 Stephen Kings in a row. Dreamcatcher, which I'd never even seen, but I enjoyed listening to you talk about it, and then Thinner, which I'm a big fan of Thinner, and I loved listening to all of you talk about it. And I'm glad April's on my side,
Oh yeah, April, one of the co-hosts of that podcast. I think she said that it's her favorite Stephen King adaptation, which I wish I was in the room with her when I recorded it, because my jaw was like on the floor. I think she may have said the best, and I was like, you can hear me on the podcast, just like I don't know what to say. Yeah,
well, I was there. I was like, you go, April, you go. Don't let them push you around. You're right. You're absolutely right. Thinner's fantastic. I'm just happy to sit back and watch Thinner. Now, the Important Cinema Club is your main podcast, and I can attest that people who I knew in other ways have contacted me and been like, hey, I heard you get discussed on the Important Cinema Club. Like, I didn't even know they listened to it. And someone as far away as like in somewhere in Asia. I can't remember exactly, but there was someone in Asia who knew my music and heard about the episode that you guys did. So you guys have got some major reach. Now my analysis is that it works because it's concise. Is that something that you focus on, keeping it short?
So what's funny about the Important Cinema Club is people always ask us this question, like, hey, could it just be like a little bit longer? Like, could it be like an hour and a half? And it's literally like me and Will, we always hit almost the same amount of time when we have a topic. By like 25 minutes on one topic, we're kind of like running out of steam and it's time to move on. I try to be aware of it now, be like, we have to hit at least 25 minutes, but that's usually our goal of about like one topic. And I think that because we do a lot of stuff that people don't know, there is a little bit like of nervousness of being like, do I want to listen to this? I don't know what this is. And as long as you know it's just like 25 minutes, I think me as a listener, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll listen to this. I like these guys. I know what their tastes are. This should be a fun ride.
Yeah, that's the way I feel. And even if I'm not even interested in the topic, the way you guys present it, there's always something good that comes out of it. And then we know you're going to answer a few listener questions, and then you're going to have that little coda section that's always a good listen. So you got a good formula, but I think keeping it short, you don't want to give the people too much. You know what I mean, Charlie?
No.
Right,
yeah.
Charlie?
It bogs down. Like when I do my other podcasts, like No Such Thing as a Bad Movie, or I did one way back, Loose Cannons, where we would go through every film that was released by Canon Films, even the ones that weren't Golden and Globus, and whew, those were some rough waters.
Yeah.
We found out, like, I never want to talk about the plot synopsis. I'm like, oh, let's just talk about it and then move on. And it's thankfully my co-host is like, no, we have to go beat by beat through it. And what was interesting about that one, and with Important Cinema Club, is that, like, we talked about some movies that, like, the son of one of the actors in one of the movies we talked about, Wicked Die Slow, which was a Western, was like, hey, I searched the name of this movie. My father starred in it. I've never actually seen it. Could you get me a copy of it? I would really appreciate it. And I could actually send it to him. And he was like, oh my God, me and my family, we're so appreciative that we can finally watch my dad in this motion picture, which I got to point out is like a really politically incorrect Western. But, you know, it's crazy that, like, you feel like everything's been done, but then you do a podcast like this and people reach out and it's like, no one has ever talked about this. If you search it on Google, you're the first thing that comes up.
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. That's a nice niche to fill. Yeah, I think when we do our podcast, Farley he kind of does a lot of good plot, and we try to start very quickly, so it's not too much chit chat that's not on topic, and then we try to, like, actually raise our hands on the video cam so we're not talking over one another as much.
Oh, that's a smart way to do it.
So we try to do that, and I don't know, it's been we have a good time doing it. They get a little bit long, but the Scalzos are like this investigative duo geniuses. They always find something that, in the most, weird genre movie, they'll think, oh, when that character said that one line that you might have missed, it could have been interpreted like this, and that unlocked like a major plot point. There's been so many times in my life where Tom has said, remember when that happened? And then I just literally, the doors open and I was like, you're so right. And I can't believe the filmmaker expected us to catch that.
Yeah, it's interesting, like in a bad movie, that if you look at it closely enough, you start to realize, oh, it's not actually that bad. Like, they did put some thought into the scenes. It's not just randomness thrown together. Like, they might not have gotten quite where they wanted to, but they were actually trying for something. And you can see it if you
try hard
spend hours researching it,
staring at it, and talking about it.
Yeah.
I should ask, Charlie, are you a collector at all of, like, movies or like VHS or DVDs?
Yeah, I am. Limited space. I focus on VHS on the ones that we have championed over the years. So, I've got the Dolers, I've got Black Lake, I've got Star Crash. Do you
go for like big box ones? Is there like
I do. I love them. In the video store, I'm a video store guy. I didn't work in one, but my friend Keith did. And that basically meant I got to hang out there and, take out anything that we wanted to watch for free. So definitely a kid from the video store era. Loved those big boxes. I've told people this before. The fun of going into a video store and picking up that box.
Oh, love
and
it.
then showing it to your friend and be, look at this. Like, doesn't that look good? And it's like you're championing that one to them, and then they might hold another box to try to convince you. It's the exact beautiful experience versus the negative experience of sitting in front of like a smart TV or a Roku. Someone has the remote in their hand and they're scrolling. Wait, stop. And you go back, go to the search box, and they're typing it in, and they're like, "No, you messed it up." And then the person's like, "You give me the remote." And maybe that's just my experience, but I feel like the scrolling online is hell, and heaven is the video store where and then you could maybe put that box back, and you know where it is exactly, and then you walk down the aisle a little bit more. And then you come back to it, you know? And, yeah, there's just a magic to it. So yes, I am a collector somewhat, very limited budget, but I do have some of the Vinegar Syndrome stuff.
I mean, you live near the Archive, right? Which is like the Vinegar Syndrome store.
Yes. So I go there when I can, and they have a nice used section too. But
that's the best. I love going through used stuff and being like, what can I get for cheap? The problem is that like a lot of used places these days, they like check the prices online, so you don't find like super deals.
Right. But just the fun genre stuff that's not a big box, you could get there very affordably. So yeah, I do have a little bit of a collection. Tom Scalzo has a huge collection, and we started before any of this VHS got expensive. So when we were buying these, it was from places going out of business, and it wasn't considered a collecting market. It was considered unload this stuff market. Like 10 movies for $10. Like big box included. So that's where our collection came from. And we have a whole backlog of some movies that aren't on DVD, some really rare ones that we have to get to. And Farley has some too. I mean, in his little downstairs there's a few gems where you just pick it up and be like, whoa, this is like a super rare, lovely VHS. We haven't watched it yet. And sometimes we'll just pop it in and watch 5 minutes at a time. And then I'll go over a month later, we'll watch 10 more minutes.
I mean, you were talking earlier, like, what were your plans? The ultimate plan would be to own, like, a video store, bookstore with a little, like, 50-seat cinema in the back that you could do, like, every couple of nights. That would be, like, the ultimate dream for me. Oh, maybe there's a little studio attached to it as well to make movies. If I had all of that, I'd be like, this is the life. I don't need anything else.
Yeah. Well, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. I mean, you're on your way. What do you got, Charlie?
Speaking of books, yes, that reminded me. I had to ask you about your book. Albert, I don't know how to say his last name.
Albert Pyun, yeah.
Albert Pyun, yeah. So you're a fan, and you wanted to like document that.
So I mean, before being a filmmaker, I always wanted to be a writer. Like I remember standing up in like grade school, being like, I want to be a writer, but it's really hard to write, especially when you can reread over your work and you're like, this is terrible. What am I doing? So books were always something I had in my mind. But there's also that fear of like, well, will this be the ultimate version of a book? Like I'd read so many film books and there's like so many annotations and there's such crazy like references of like, I got this here and I got this there. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get something so wrong. So an Albert Pyun book has always been like on the top of my mind. But my thought was somebody else is going to write a book about him and it'll be better than mine. So I'll just let them do it. But then years went by and I'm like, is no one going to write a book about him? And then finally, we were going to do a screening of his second film, Radioactive Dreams, on 35 millimeter at part of our Laser Blast Film Society monthly screening series. So I went, all right, I'm going to write like a monograph thing, and I'll sell it at the screening. And the way I'll do it is I'll review all of his movies and just write 1,000 words per movie, and that'll be the book. That's it. And all the projects, even like the Blu-ray stuff, as long as I give myself a structure and I can hit those beats, then I'm satisfied. It's not like, what am I supposed to do? What am I missing? So with that in mind, I was like, 1,000 words per movie, easy. It was 53 or something like that movies. And as I'm writing it, I was like, I wonder if I could reach out to any of his cast or crew that he worked with a lot, and if they do an interview. And they did. And all 3 of them were like, I've never actually spoken about this before, even though I made like 20 movies with Albert. So that was a great experience. Again, once I learned that all the responsibility would be on me and that I could like self-print it through Amazon, I'm like, no, I'm not going to write a book that won't sell. I'll be able to print it. And that's what I did. That's how the book came about.
Nice. And you didn't have to spend any money up front, which is nice,
No
too.
money up front.
Yeah.
And it was a thing that I actually like would order a copy, and then like I'd have to proof it, and I'd see, oh, I screwed up like the margins, and there's a bunch of spelling mistakes still in this. I have to go over it with a red pen. And because I was able to do that, I didn't have an editor. Will read it, and so did my partner Emily, which was very helpful. But like at the end of the day, it was me just like obsessively going over it and having a computer voice read it back to me throughout, just to make sure that it all made sense.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
Has he's around still, Albert?
Oh yeah, he's read it. I've been in contact with his cinematographer that I interviewed in the book, and was like a super cool guy. And he said there was like a big meeting where they all got together, and I was invited to it, but it was in Las Vegas, and I couldn't afford to fly there. And so it ended up with them, chatting about the book. And according to the cinematographer, he talked to Albert, and Albert was like, "Oh man, yeah, it's a genius piece of work. I love it."
Hey.
Since then, people have contacted me and have said I was writing an Albert Pune book, and I was like, you can still write it. Like mine is just a starting, a gun. Go and do like a super detailed one. That's fine with me. I considered myself the French New Wave critics that became directors, Claude Chabrol and Eric Ramer. They wrote a book on Hitchcock, a very thin one, but that kind of like started the train of it. And that's what I consider my Albert Pune book. I hope it starts a train to like people that are either rich and can spend all the time on it and will do tons of research, can, release the ultimate version of the book.
Cool.
When you're doing the podcast, you range from the really like the masters, the auteurs, the ones that people might know about, or even just are so like. But what I'm saying is, you go from the lofty stuff to like the grimy stuff, all the way to the bottom. Yeah. Now, what is more popular, and how do you decide on these things?
So if it was up to me and Will Sloan, we would only do like the grimy, nobody talks about them filmmakers, because we love to explore their work. But we know what people will click on. It's like the super popular stuff. So that's why we do like an episode on Nick Cage that literally made us like 10th on the film and TV podcast charts.
Nice.
Because so many people listen to it.
Yeah.
Or like we're doing Wes Anderson next week. But we always try to find like a weird angle on it. Like Wes Anderson, we're talking it from the perspective of Wes Anderson exploitation, which is people that rip off Wes Anderson and make movies like him, like Nacho Libre, or Roman Coppola did a bunch of movies like that, or Garden State.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about Wes Anderson, but we'll also talk about this other stuff. We're like, we did Steven Spielberg. We did the bad Steven Spielberg, like all the movies nobody likes, or the Coen brothers. We did all the comedies that nobody likes. And, we talk about the filmmakers as a whole, but we focus in on those movies just because to make it feel fresh and not just to be like another, anonymous voice of the pile. There's so many podcasts that talk about that kind of stuff.
Do you think a lot of people go onto podcast apps and just type in like the name of their favorite director or their favorite movie and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I have no doubt that tons of people do that. We get a lot of emails of people being like, oh, I listened to this episode about a filmmaker. Sometimes it'll be one like a little bit more obscure, like Guy Maddin, but like, they're looking for something about a filmmaker that they know and have an appreciation for, and they just want to hear somebody talk about it. And I understand that. Like, I remember when I used to listen to Mark Maron, I'd be like, I don't know who this person is. I don't want to listen to a 2-hour interview with them, even though that, like, the times that I did, it was great. So I understand that there is like a barrier to like people wanting to get into something that they don't know. But like you mentioned, the length, as long as it's not that long, it's a good introduction to it. And we always try to be positive as well. It's been very rare where we've been like, I found nothing of value with this filmmaker.
Yeah.
Like we did a Robot Monster episode like 2 weeks ago. And that was one that like, those movies aren't good, but like we can talk about them in a really interesting way. And, you can do fun research. Like I read a 700-page book on the director of Robot Monster.
Yeah. That's interesting stuff.
All right, I think, Charlie, you get everything you needed to know?
Yeah, I am pretty darn happy. It was fun to learn about how you run your Golden Ninja and all your projects you got going on. And
it's Gold Ninja, right? Not Golden.
Yeah, Gold Ninja Video.
Oh, just Gold Ninja?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the inspiration for the name? Did you just...
I was probably thinking of Godfrey Ho. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his movies. He was a Hong Kong filmmaker that was famous for buying movies around the world, buying in air quotes, and editing them together with new footage, mostly with Richard Harrison dressed as a ninja.
Yeah.
So you'd get like a Filipino like crime film, and then suddenly Richard Harrison shows up and like fights for 2 minutes as a ninja.
Yeah.
And so like Gold Ninjas were all over those, and I just thought it was like a funny, like iconic thing. And like the logo I made like in paint using just like the circle tool and 2 little dots. And I was like, I'll change it later on. And nope, it's still the same thing. 13 releases in at this point. And, gold means it's great. Ninja, ninjas are fun. Everybody likes those. So it's like Laser Blast Film Society. It's just like something catchy that like people will go, oh, what's that?
Yeah, it worked. Sweet. Well, I think it's a good, it's just a good lesson in like a snowball situation where you start doing things because you love it. Things take off, slowly getting better, and then using an audience you have in from the podcast and finding a way to produce something that they're gonna like and that will make you a little bit of money and that you enjoy doing, and then also to kind of direct them towards your movies. I mean, if you didn't have the podcast, I would think your movies would be viewed way less, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that, like, any filmmaker, I mean, you guys went through this. You think that, like, film festivals will be the answer? Like, oh, people will just come to this random film festival and they'll see my movie. And then when you get turned down from, like, dozens and dozens of film festivals, you're like, maybe this film festival thing isn't the right route to go. Do I need to apply for grants or something like that? Have you guys ever considered that, like, writing a grant proposal?
No.
Has never even crossed your mind?
Well, I mean, we know it's an option, but we're just like, what grant people are gonna give us money?
I would say that you guys, because you have a body of work that you can like show that you've done, you are already like head and shoulders above like most people making films. Like every time I see like somebody showed me a short and they're like, oh, this cost $200,000. I got like a Ontario Arts grant. I'm like, what? I could have made like 10 movies with that money. Feature films.
Have you tried to get grants or no?
I did once, and I was so embarrassed by it that like I got turned down. That I met somebody in line that was like an acquaintance, and she's like, "Oh, I was on the grant board. You sent a script, right?" And I was like, "Well, no, I don't think so. I did not send a script." And she actually kept pressing. She's like, "I'm pretty sure you sent a script and packaging." And I was like, "No, it must have been somebody else with say similar name." I mean, Matt, you've talked about this too. Is like, why should someone take you seriously, when you start? And, once you have a body of work behind you, you've done a bunch of stuff, it's easier to be like, look at all this stuff I have. And, people you show it to will be like, they don't care, but it makes you feel better a little bit.
But yeah, the lesson of Justin is, he's just doing himself. Film festivals aren't doing it for him. Grant people aren't doing it for him. He's like, well, I'm doing it for me, and I think, and people who are trying to make it in anything that's sort of creative and entrepreneurial, the lesson isn't to do exactly what you do, but the lesson is it's a long process and it's tons of work and mistakes until you figure out some method that works. And I mean, I'm sure you have more ambitions than where you are right now, but you're a lot farther down the road than you were 5 years ago.
Oh yeah, I would say that like, don't hang all your hopes on one thing, which I think happens to a lot of people. Happened to me, where you like make a movie and you're like, people are gonna like this, and then it's like people are like, oh yeah, this is nice. You're like, oh okay, but we spent so much time on it. It took years.
Yeah,
They're like, oh yeah, we enjoyed it, and it's that realization, and it's something that I still struggle with. I am trying to go to that point that someone like Matt can do, which is like, you make something, you put it out in the world, and then you move on to the next thing. And as long as you can do that, and you don't like expect to just make something right from the get-go that everybody will appreciate, then you can keep working. Just don't like burn yourself all out on like the first or second or third or fourth or fifth thing that you're doing. Like, build your way up until you can build an audience, or you feel comfortable enough to put it out in the world and it can be supported.
Yeah. And I think the ones that you're, like with your podcast, you don't know which one's necessarily going to have the greatest impact, even if it has the highest downloads the first, month.
Mm-hmm.
Just like that family that contacted you, there could be someone who's putting out some Italian box set and they found that you guys were the only ones who were talking about this thing. You know,
my fingers are crossed all the time that like a Blu-ray company will reach out and be like, hey, I heard that you've done this. It's actually happened that I've reached out to Blu-ray companies and been like, hey, I hear you're putting this out on movie. We'll do it for free. Look, we wrote an article on it. We did a podcast, and we've gotten a lot of like, oh, thanks, but no thanks. But every now and then someone will be like, oh yeah, sure, you can do this for us. You can write a booklet. We love that. Like Definitely. I'm on the commentary for Unmasked Part 23, the like slasher parody that came out, the Vinegar Syndrome put out. Me and Peter interviewed the screenwriter for that. And we've received emails from like the son of Paul Naschy, who thanked us for doing a podcast on his father, or the sons of Gary Graver, the cinematographer and director of like, you know, he worked with Orson Welles. He did The Other Side of the Wind, and like no one's talking about these people. And so like when we do it, that's why we like doing the little people, is that we can like spend, you know, 25 minutes talking about them, and hopefully they can become big people, and a lot more, you know, fans can come from that.
I have one more question about Ultimate Horror. The main actress in Ultimate Horror.
Impossible Horror.
Thank you.
Horror.
Sorry. No,
that's fine.
Who's the main actress?
Haley. There's two. There's Haley and Cree. Haley is like the protagonist of the movie.
Let's go with Haley. So how many? You had her filming at night, pretty much all her scenes. How many?
Yeah.
How many?
It was a nightmare.
How many nights?
The nights, it was 2 weeks of nights. Basically, the movie was supposed to star April and Emily. So April, who does No Such Thing as a Bad Movie, and Emily, my partner. And then my pal Nate Wilson got involved and was like, hey, I want to help. I want to produce. I can get actors for you, and we can do it all in 2 weeks. And I was like, yeah, let's just get it done. What a nightmare that was. So hard. You know, we didn't have a big team of people that were going out, but it was a big enough team that like someone would get tired or someone would start talking, and then everybody starts talking, and you're like, just focus, please. So yeah, we'd go out, I think we shot during the summer, 10 o'clock till like 5:30 in the morning for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow. Were they like, after, have they spoken to you since shooting ended? Or?
Oh yeah, they've spoken to me. Well, we had to shoot for like almost a year, like every 3 months I do like a day where I'm like, we didn't get it all. We have to do this. And then there's like the nervousness of like, what if they say no?
Right.
What if they don't want to do the scene? So I have to like, I like tiptoe around it, being like, if you're free, we can do this. And
go out for a cup of tea, do some ADR.
And like one of the actors, one of the main actors, was brought in by the producer, started to be like on the outs with the producer as well. And she was not an actor. Like this was not something that interested her that much. So I'm like, oh man, if she says she doesn't want to do this anymore, we are so screwed. Yeah. But we were able to do it. So yeah. I wake up in a cold sweat still, being like, oh my God, do I have to shoot? I got to get ready.
Are you keeping all that in mind while writing your next movie?
Oh man, it's the biggest like stumbling block where you start writing something. I'm like, this is such a good idea. It's so easy to do, super easy to film. I start writing. I'm like, oh man, it's gonna be so hard. I'm gonna get this many people together. 35 pages in, I'm like, I'm gonna write something easier. Put it away.
It's just 2 weeks in
there, I'm like, I got such a good idea. This will be so easy.
Well, Charlie and I were talking just last week or something about how, like, beginning Metal Detector Maniac, that's exactly what I was saying to Charlie. I'm like, this one is going to be easy to film. We won't have all the, the turmoil. And no matter what, it just ends with we are broken men, just like crawling our way towards the finish line, and only thinking about the next movie after this. And that,
It's such a weird thing because, like, when the movie ends and you have it in your hands and it's done, you're like, that wasn't so hard. Like, I'm okay. I have all my limbs. But then when you, like, start thinking about the next one, you're like, for me, sometimes I'm like, oh, man, this is going to be hard. And, like, I have people that would be happy to help me. Like, my partner, Emily, she's just like, do it and we'll figure it out. Just write it. Like, it'll be easy. And I'm like, just sweating, thinking about, like, how am I going to do this? While my first movie had people having gunfights, like, in public. And I was like, I'm just going to write it. This is easy. No problem.
Yeah,
it's what you do when you're like a kid filmmaker. You just don't, like when they did Evil Dead. I don't think they really thought about all that being at a cabin without electricity and no phone and in the middle of, many states away. And yeah, that stuff's crazy. And I think some filmmakers, maybe you with your stories, and maybe even for us, it's hard to forget them sometimes. Where, like they say, Spielberg with Jaws, right? Is like, you can't just like sit down and have a nice talk about Jaws. Still, this many years later, that's how intense it was.
Well, the good thing about The Evil Dead is that like they made this movie, they sweated and it was awful, and then a studio paid for their next movie. Well, you guys, it's like a studio's not like, hey, it's going to get a little bit easier. You'll have a line producer now and, somebody in charge of the props. Nope, it's still you. You have to do it all over again.
Yeah. We got to do all the work, but we don't have to answer to anybody.
That's the best thing.
Yeah.
Is that you don't have to be like, hey, what do you think about this? And the person's like, no, I don't think so. And you're like, can I convince you? They're like, nope. I'm like, oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
Well, at least I have health insurance as the person that's working for a studio.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, you lose creative control, but you have health insurance. But ultimately, you're gonna die either way. I'd rather die having had creative control while I was alive.
I agree. I worked on a lot of film sets and TV sets where I'd meet like a 41-year-old assistant cameraman. He's like, "I'm gonna shoot my first short film soon." I was like, "Oh, okay. Why haven't you done it yet?"
Yeah.
Like, it hasn't been right.
Yeah. No.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure.
Amen. All right, well, this has been good stuff. Thanks, Justin and Charlie.
No problem.
Thank you.
Legendary, what do we call this again? The two podcasts converging?
Joint venture. Like a triple venture of like 3 executives, like a boutique company.
Yeah.
This is like De Palma and Coppola and Scorsese having a conversation.
Oh, yeah. Didn't they make a company? Wasn't it like... It's like United Artists, Charlie Chaplin, Clark Gable, Mary Pickford coming together to make and talk about movies.
We're exactly
and then
like
it
that.
It always self-destructs eventually.
Yeah, too many egos. All right, good podcast. I'm gonna hit stop.